Fangirl Friday Live. This is Anita Castellar. It is Fangirl Friday. Every Friday, we unpack the business behind the fandom. Bienvenidos a Fangirl Friday Live. Bienvenido, Ivan. How are you, Ivan? We're going to say everything bilingual today.
That's right. Pretty good. Pretty good. Very awesome to be here with you and geek out for a moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that you were able to join us. So let's start with who you are and what do you do?
Well, my name is Ivan Plaza, and I'm the owner and founder of Chido Comics, which is a independent comic book and graphic novel publishing company. And at the moment, not only I'm working on projects for big corporation when they're looking to do comic book projects involving their products, but then I also started publishing my own line of creator-owned comic books, and very soon starting to publish other creator friends, projects and stuff.
Wow, that sounds great. So how did you get started in the comic book industry and kind of them moving into actually creating your own company?
Well, let's
throw it back. Let's throw it back to little Ivan. And so we have a shared commonality in culture. So I'll just start there where, I'm first generation in the States. So my heritage is Puerto Rican, but you were born on the island. Is that correct?
Right. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico and moved here to Florida. And 2004. And just sort of like for one of the many reasons that a lot of people from Puerto Rico moved to the United States, just looking for, a betterment and trying to, do something with your life. And but in terms of starting with comic books, well, if we're going to talk about fandoms, right, you got to start with like the what I like to call the Mount Rushmore of fandoms, which is you got movies, television, comic books and video games. Not necessarily in in that order, but that's sort of like how you start. And being an 80s kid myself, there was such an explosion, of all of that at the same time. And you sort of like gravitate towards that. What happened with me was that I don't know when along the way, when you start consuming all that content, you obviously become a fan, you love it. And then some people just stay there. But then there's the ones that, you want to know how it works, and you want to know how it's made, and you want to see what happens in behind the scenes and that sort of stuff. So that's how I sort of got into creating comic books. Back in Puerto Rico, I used to be, work as a graphic designer. That's what I studied. But studied graphic design. And at the time, back in when I used to live there, that was sort of like the only outlet. If you were into computers and that sort of stuff, those were the jobs that were available at the time. So I used to work at magazines and newspapers and doing ads and that logos and all the typical stuff. Working at print shops and all that stuff. So when the opportunity came for me to finish my studies here in Tampa, then I, from newspapers, sort of like started working in marketing agencies over here in the States. And all of a sudden I had a lot of local access to comic book stores that I really didn't have in Puerto Rico. There were some stores like in San Juan area and that sort of thing, but I'm from Ponce, so for me to drive 2 hours to buy comic books, or it's just wasn't as accessible as it is today. So being able to feed into my comic book fandom, going to comic book stores, one of the owner at the time, he saw that one of his subscribers was a really good graphic designer and knew about marketing. And he was in dire need of marketing for his store. And that's how I sort of like got my way into comic books. So I was very happy with the fact that I was able to finally combine the thing that I love to do into work. So it no longer was a job. It was something that I would just wake up and go to work, and I was just enjoying my time there, and spent several years there. And what happened during that job, or my time at the comic book store, I then learned how to market comic books, how publishers try to reach new fans, how to talk to the readership, and that sort of thing. And that always sort of like interests me. So I learned to not only market comic books, but then work with publishers whenever they did their retailer summits. As being part of a comic store, you get invited to go have these meetings with Marvel and DC and Image Comics, and all the retailers get together in one place, and they all share their ideas or new upcoming series and how we should market them, and this is what we're trying to do, and all that stuff was really fascinating. That was like my little bit of taste of the behind the scenes of the comic book publishing world. Then after that, that's when you get again that little bug. It starts biting you, and you go, well, I think I've got my share of publishing. Marketing comic books and working on retail and learning how to interact with fans and what do they like and what they don't like, and how from there it goes to other forms of media like TV and movies and all that good stuff, merchandise as well. And that's when I wanted to okay, now I want to create comic books. Now I want to know how does that work, and where did that takes me. And that's how I figured to start Chido Comics.
Wow. So, not everybody makes the leap to start their own publishing company, but in one way though, so you studied graphic design. For those who are interested in artistry or, comics, or, just being an artist in design, what did you study? Let's just.
So it was just graphic design and marketing was my bachelor's degree. So at the time, obviously I wasn't thinking about comic books or anything like that, or anything related to that. I was just thinking, well, maybe I can get a job making, the those flyers from like supermarkets, and just getting a job, so that my mom will be, happy, and like, okay, mom, I got a job, you can chill now. So that's where I was going. Then I think in Puerto Rico, if you got a job at a newspaper or a magazine that was distributed at original level, that's the thing, then you were good. So that's what I did. So and then I freelanced a lot. So if there's someone interested in graphic design, that's sort of like the thing you do, right? Unless there's different categories. Like you can get into web design, you can get into all sorts of other things, right? There's so many things that you can do now, but for me, those were the only options there. And really, the reason I got into graphic design is because I really wanted to be in animation, but there wasn't really anything near that, or any sort of like degree, or there was no programs like that. Now there are. Now kids down there. Actually, my niece, she's studying art. She's going to the same school I went, and she's loving it. And they have all these other options now: animation, video game programming, all this good stuff. Back when I was there, there wasn't. And that was one of the.
What school is that?
It's called Atlantic University. So it's one of the big schools down there, and I'm pretty sure like the University of Puerto Rico has their programs now, and there's a lot more options because now it's a viable thing. You need graphic designers to make the world amazing and pretty, right? So that's sort of like how I got there. And then once I moved to the States, Florida specifically, I'm here in Tampa, Florida. then I started looking around, where can I go, where can I get paid more, that sort of thing.
So what was the first project that you started working on that was more like, okay, I made it into this industry, I've arrived?
It's I think it was during my time at the comic book store, and I think this is what gave me the idea of, all right, maybe I can actually do this for a living, right? Or sort of like jump and do it myself. So at the time, well, so Marvel has this division where it creates comic books for, if there's a corporation that's wanting to do some sort of like cross promotional thing where they want to use comic books to reach out to a certain demographic or an audience, they use comic books for that. So they hire, you could actually hire Marvel to create that comic book for you, or DC or any other company, as far as I'm concerned, but mostly big, corporate comic books, right? Which will be Marvel and DC.
Mm-hmm.
A good example of one of those type of promotions, this was probably like 3 or 4 years ago, I'm not sure, but DC did this crossover with KFC,
Yeah.
and they did this comic book with Green Lantern and the Colonel Sanders, and
Oh my gosh,
complete craziness, but it's great, and people were loving it. And I remember being at New York Comic Con, and people were like, "Where's the KFC comic book?" I'm like, "What?" So it works. And at the time when I was at the comic store, Marvel contacted us. They contacted the store. We were, one of the biggest stores at the time. And they saw how we, did very good with fans and the type of output that we were doing marketing wise. And they were trying to do some sort of, well, they actually did it with the state of Florida to promote orange juice. And
oh wow,
so they created this, if I remember correctly, people can, probably Google this. It was called Captain Citrus. They created this whole superhero about orange juice and, Florida orange juice, and, for the kids and, whatnot. So, they came to the store, did a whole press release. The news came over. It was great. There was also some sort of like a little bit of a controversy because a lot of taxpayers were complaining because Florida spent like $1 million in this this whole project, and people were like,
really?
What are we doing? But it was all good and fun. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, that I can do. Maybe I'm not, right now at the level of storytelling and I don't have the money to like start these things, but I can actually offer those services to companies that might not be able to afford a Marvel or a big company, and I can take advantage of that. And that's what sparked the idea of starting Chido Comics. Chido Comics started as a company to provide those kind of services to other corporations, that sort of thing. And that's how I've been able to pay the bills, to this day so far. So a lot of the things, I'm slowly but surely publishing things are original to Chido Comics, that stuff that's mine, stuff that's from other creators. But most of the time, I'm always behind the scenes creating other weird comic books for other people.
Something new, doing something new. Like, well, it seems like you're a combination of creating your own stories, which are coming out soon, and we can get to that in a second, but then also promoting and creating other people's stories.
Right.
Along
And
the way.
to answer your question, that was just a long answer to the first type of project that I did, was once I realized that, then the news were coming out that Robert Rodriguez was starting his own, new television network. It was called El Rey Network. And that I went like, oh my God, that's it. So maybe I can, move heaven and earth and try to get my way in there, and sort of like maybe they, because to me, Robert Rodriguez exemplified everything that had to do with, comic books and pop culture, and it's mostly because of the type of content that he's done over his career.
Let's stop there and give a quick little synopsis of who Robert Rodriguez is and like why he's important.
Okay, sorry. So Robert Rodriguez is a movie film director. And he's done movies like he came into the scene where with this big film called El Mariachi. That's how he got his foot in the door, and then from there spawned movies like Desperado with Antonio Banderas.
Yeah.
He worked on comic book stuff like Sin City from Frank Miller's Sin City. He's done Machete, Spy Kids, which turned out to be a huge franchise, especially representing Latinos in films. So he's that kind of person. So then when the news came out that he was starting his own TV network, a lot of people's minds were blown. So I
El
knew
Rey was impactful though, because it was basically like bilingual programming or at least showcasing, even if it was in English language, Latino creators or movies or franchises or what have you, that would frame up a different perspective of
right.
people in the States.
Right. It was certainly meant for the second, third generation Latino here in the United States that English is their first language, but they also know Spanish. So,
right.
but they preferably, talk in English because they were born here and that sort of thing.
But the cultural connection is still there.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Very much so with everything that they did, and including the programming and that kind of stuff. So
you try to get into that.
Oh,
the network.
100%. I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to get in there, because if I ever want to, because this also comes from the fact that, when you, as a Latino in the United States, you start thinking like, my chances of getting into television or into the film industry and that sort of thing, it's, very, right. So then I figure like, maybe I have a chance here, because then, they're going to look at me and going to see what I can do. And if I pitch myself correctly, then, maybe I'll have a chance. And, lo and behold, that's what happened. So when I, not going into how I got there, because, oh my God, I knocked on so many doors. But once I, was able to get in there and pitch what I was trying to do, which essentially was, listen, you guys are trying to do this thing. You need me and you need to hire me. And this is the reason why. And they went like, oh, you know what? It's a very good point. And that's how I, got my way in it. It sounds, I'm making it sound easy, but it wasn't.
How long did it take you until you got like at least the meeting to pitch your
stuff? Man, probably, it was day in, day out, knocking on doors and looking for contacts and, doing networking, probably like 4 or 5 months.
Oh,
that's relatively not, in the entertainment industry, that's like a blink, right? To some people, but for me, it was an eternity, and especially when you have, you're a person that has no credits or no contacts, and a lot of trying to get into the industry is your networking. And then I'm not, I don't live in Texas or California. I'm a guy from Tampa. Who's going to listen to me? But at the time when I got a hold of the marketing people there, they were having this issue that when people were, at least this is what I was explained or told, is that they were having problems with people not being able to tell apart that when they saw El Rey on the cable list, right, when you go through the channels, they just thought it was just another Univision or Telemundo or something like that. And they were like, no, this is like Robert Rodriguez's playlist of, kaiju and monsters and grindhouse and, none of that stuff. Yeah. So then my pitch to them was like, well, listen, your audience is right here. We're reading comic books. We're enjoying the same things that he's trying to put in there. Use comic books. Let's use comic books. Let's take some of your IPs that you already own and you control, and let's do that and sort of like sneak our way into that. And that was the idea. Everybody loved it, and that's how I got my first job. The first job being this TV show that was the pretty much the golden baby at the time, which was a show called Lucha Underground.
Yeah.
And it was this, it was very much a television, it was a soap opera that happened to have Lucha Libre in it.
It's supposed to be kind of like a little bit reality show, kind of soap opera, telenovela style.
Yes. Yeah, well, absolutely.
Throw a dash of Lucha in there.
Yeah, yeah, it was very much like a Maria Mercedes with Lucha Libre. It was just some crazy, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And it worked. So what happened with that was, I mean, obviously we had plans of doing many, many, many things, but because of that was priority number one, we sort of like shifted into working on that first.
Mhm.
And the new thing that was going on was, people, when you talk wrestling and you talk lucha libre, um that's, it's always on.
Yeah.
Lucha libre is one of the things that they don't take breaks. It's on every week.
There's
But
no
this show,
seasons to it. It's not
right,
like
there's
we're
no
gonna go on
seasons.
hiatus for the summer and come back and no.
Right,
It's all the time.
all the time. Which, by the way, that should change for those poor people. But so
They need some breaks.
yeah, I mean, they're breaking their
Yeah.
backs, every week. But this show did have, because it was primarily a television program, not a wrestling promotion. It did have season, and that was like the new thing that was going to take people by surprise, right? So then when people were enjoying this first season, it was incredibly popular with fans and wrestling fans, and they took a break. Then they couldn't, fans couldn't figure out how to deal with the fact that they needed to wait 4 or 5 months to keep enjoying the story. So then that's when we suggested, like, listen, let's just, all right, let's do the comic books here, but then let's do something that's never been done before, and let's make the comic books canon to the show, and
Okay.
tell the stories of what's going on in the span of those, that break, and then people will be ready to just jump right in, and it's like they didn't
It's
wait.
kind of like taking the Walking Dead approach, it's like there's some story here and then there's some story here.
Right.
They diverged. It's maybe a bad example, but there was some story that you could pick up in the comic, and then there was some story you could pick up in
Right,
the
because,
TV
well,
show.
Walking Dead is just, it's just a, well, I mean, the show is an adaptation of the comic. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the same
Following
thing.
along 100%. Yeah.
But they do, with Fear the Walking Dead, that it's from, comes from the actual TV show. So what we're trying to do is just throw in a little bit of transmedia element to it, right? So
Right.
not just, oh, here's a licensed comic book of Lucha Underground. No,
Yeah.
if you read it, it'll, um,
It'll bridge the story time.
correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm here for you.
And that's what we did. And at the time, it was one of the best. I mean, one of the most successful marketing campaigns at El Rey, and we did so many fun things in the comic book because, for example, there were some wrestlers that their contracts were up, so they weren't going to show up on season 2. And there was no way they weren't going to explain why. It was just a weird thing. They couldn't figure it out. So then we went like, hey, I asked them, like, can we kill those, in the comic book? Let's just go Mortal Kombat on them.
Yeah.
And they go like, sure. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. And there's some people that died in the comic book, didn't show up in season 2, and then fans will go on YouTube and review the comic books. Oh my God, this is what happened to this guy, because of the comic books he died, and this other guy. The second season of the show, this one of the major characters in the show was this Undertaker-like character called Mil Muertes, right? And he's actually from a fellow Puerto Rican who played the character. And he had this throne of skulls, made out of skulls.
He
Nobody
was
knew
doing Game of
why.
Thrones before everybody was doing Game of Thrones.
Right. And nobody knew why. Nobody knew where that throne came from. So the comic book explained that, and where those skulls came from. And most of the wrestlers that died, their skulls were part of that throne, and people's minds were blown. And they couldn't believe what's going. So everything worked out very well. And it was very successful.
An example, sorry to interrupt you there, but that goes as a live example of how good brand management, franchise owners, can continue the storytelling, connect, what they're showing on screens, whether it be a movie or a TV show, to a different format, keep fans engaged on the long run. That's how we build fandom. right? That's how people who have an IP or an intellectual property, you know, they can keep people engaged along the way. And so if their TV shows on hiatus, like you're saying, you know, how do you keep the momentum? You don't want to lose the momentum. How do we, you know, and that's where you're going. I feel like in one way, like for instance, live right now is Stranger Things, and Stranger Things has kind of like gone like this because I feel like, you know, in between, I'm a huge Stranger Things fan, but I feel like it loses a little bit of momentum, and people are just like tapping around waiting for the next season to come around, you know, as opposed to like there's something in the middle to keep them engaged. And
Right.
whether that be a video game or a comic or chapter books, I mean, like take your pick, folks at Netflix. I'm calling it
I
out.
wonder, and I wonder if that's mostly because of how Netflix manages their licensing, you know, opportunities. I don't know. I know
I don't know, but that's just the storytelling is always key. I always tell everybody, like, you know, you have to bring forward your storytelling, whether it's in the consumer products, like you're telling the same story in an action figure, a chunk of, you know, it's not just a chunk of plastic or the t-shirt. I mean, like, you know, this is my Wonder Woman t-shirt right now, but it's part of the story, right? It's
right.
like it extends what happens on the screen or in the comics or iconography that you might see. And you know, now people are wanting to wear it or lifestyle it, but it's still part of the same, you know, moments in time. You can pull this out and have a shirt and pull this out and have a whatever, fill in the blank, right? And but it connects to the larger story. And that's where you don't lose your fans and you keep authentic, but you keep building that connectivity. And that's what you guys were doing on Lucha Underground with the wrestlers and the TV show and the comics, and keeping their personalities also authentic, right? Because you couldn't write something that wasn't, you know, really true to who they were.
Right. If everything was tied to the show. As a matter of fact, when you mentioned Stranger Things, I know for a fact there's Stranger Things comic books. I think Dark Horse published comic books, but I'm not sure if they were filling in any gaps, you know,
Yeah.
between stories or seasons.
Or if it's a
Maybe they
retelling or
were,
something.
yeah, maybe there's some tie-ins or expanding on characters or that sort of thing, but not sure if they had to do with
Yeah. So
you
now
know
you're telling new stories. You're telling your own stories.
right.
I think we have one that has with lucha. We'll keep with the lucha theme just for now,
Yeah.
because I want to talk about your video, the video that we opened up with too as well, the trailer, the very X-Files ish idea. But tell about your Lucha All Stars, you know, comic book coming out.
Oh, yeah. So, All-Star Champions.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It is Lucha Libre, so it's, you know, it's all good. And so that's a story that I'm working on right now. It should be coming out later this fall. And that's just sort of like, so okay. So for example, we talked about the work that I did with Lucha Underground and El Rey Network and all that stuff. Then I also did a project which you probably know very well, for this company called Mass Republic, and we did the Luchaverse for them.
Right.
That sort of like came about, uh, you know, when they saw what we were doing with Lucha Underground, sort of like sparked the idea to, oh, maybe, you know, there should be a, you know, Lucha Libre universe or some, you know, some sorts. And that was also very successful for me and for them. And so now I have this, you know, fan base, not only just comic book readers, but we have wrestling and Lucha Libre fans who enjoyed reading comic books. Some of them for
Right.
the very first time, maybe they never picked up a comic book, but now they go like, oh, well, this is cool. This is, we can complement, you know, whatever a program or wrestling promotion can't really afford to film or produce. It can be done in comic book form, and you know,
Another way to engage with the fans, you know.
right. And like a lot of people say, you know, there's no special effects budget in comic books, right? Only the extremely hard work of comic book artists, you know, that
The
have to
special
do all
effects
that.
is in your imagination.
Right, right. So then I figure like, well, there's a fan base here, and at the time, you know, not a lot of people were doing wrestling comic books. So, you know, most people thought like, well, you know, that's dumb. You know, it
Yeah.
makes no sense. But you just got to know how to do it. Now you can see, and I love seeing so many people inspired and doing their own lucha libre characters, because in a way, luchadores are like you know, superheroes, like original Latino superheroes, right? And a crossover very well, not just from, you know, people that come from Mexico, which lucha libre, you know, comes from, and it's culturally anchored to Mexico. But then, there's Japan, and there's, obviously American wrestling, who much of the new style that they do now is based on lucha libre.
Yeah, like the high flying styles and
Correct.
such like that. Yeah.
So, I thought, all right, I need to, keep that, train, moving, and keep catering to those people. And also, I'm a huge lucha libre fan myself, so I needed to get that out of my system. So All Star Champions, it's sort of like my combination of what I'm trying to do is, or my spin to lucha libre would be that lucha libre is this, secret, sort of like a Men in Black-ish, that you don't know what's going on, but they're actually there because they're saving the universe and the planet, and they're just hiding in plain sight by having lucha libre matches. What they're really doing is selecting the best, champions to then, put them all together and fight, whatever.
Kind of like X-Men and, X-Files and
there's a lot in there, yeah.
Men in Black and
but it's mostly like obviously I love the aspect of the tournaments and the fighting and the good guys versus bad guys and that sort of stuff, but being able to bring in Latino characters into it, because if when you talk lucha libre, you should be able to think, Latin heritage and that kind of thing. So
a lot of people only think though that Mexicans like lucha libre, right? Like that, I think that's a misconception that it's only just Mexicans that like it. Yeah, it's very much like you said, anchored in the Mexican culture, and it's like iconically tied to Mexico. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that people outside of Mexico in Latin America, really do enjoy and follow lucha libre, in the Caribbean, such as, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and then, down into South America as well. So, and in the United States, of course, we brought it with us, because if we've come from a different country, from the, Latin America and that cultural heritage, we follow lucha, along with everybody else. So it, as a kid, I used to watch, American wrestling with my dad, and he would flip the channel and it'd be like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and now it's time for the lucha, on Univision, and we'd be watching, that one. So it was, for us, it's kind of like it's seamless. We can flow back and forth, but a lot of misconception is that only Mexicans like lucha libre and only Mexicans are luchadors.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And then Japan is huge and with wrestling, and there's been many of the characters that have come out from Japan wear masks. There's this character called, and there's been an anime and mangas about this character. It's called Tiger Mask. And he's a huge, character in Japan, and that spawned not only exploitation in media with the anime series and that sort of thing, but also toys and all sorts of things. Even what's another example? There's so many, but I can't.
I remember the kids watching like on TV, like El Tigre, right? Or
on Nickelodeon. Yeah, that's right.
Lucha.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like my kids used to love watching, and I used to watch it with them because I thought it was just kind of cool and fun. But it was really interesting how it was really popular. And so, it just goes to show that there's a bigger fandom there for lucha and for, just the culture in general of bringing in, Hispanic culture, speaking Spanish, the bilingual aspects to it and stuff like that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people, when you say bilingual, we're talking about Spanish English, but there's a lot of folks who are bilingual that are not speaking Spanish, right? They're speaking fill in the blank other thing,
right?
Whether it be whatever, you could French or all the way to Vietnamese. Like there's a whole gamut of how to be bilingual, but those stories aren't always being told. But it's, at least from our culture perspective, you're in there in the mix telling those stories. But and then now you're getting into really back to Puerto Rican roots, right? With El Coqui. So like tell us about Coqui and what the premise is. And then tell us like about the teaser video, because I know that was a little bit strange for probably people to really watch and be like, what is that?
Yeah. that teaser is super weird, and I think it was intended to, be weird because the intention was to let people know there's something going on in El Yunque, and El Yunque is this, one of the biggest national
rainforest, right?
rainforests, yeah, and in Puerto Rico. So, and it's a beautiful place. Yeah, I think at some point it was even considered to be included in the new list of the wonders of the world. Um, and fantastic place. And the history behind it is not only tied with our Taino heritage from Puerto Rico, the natives from the island. Then I just wanted to tell a story that had to do with that, but also El Coqui, which is the native frog of Puerto Rico, and even its name come from the sound that it makes. During the at night, it makes the Coqui sound. Some people find it annoying. Some people find it very peaceful. But
all night it's like Coqui, Coqui.
Yeah, there's no escaping it. You're gonna hear it. And so the Coqui is sort of like the unofficial mascot of Puerto Rico, because there's obviously there's several native species of animals, like the parrot, the Puerto Rican parrot, and like all these other animals, but the Coqui is like the most
iconic.
Iconic, yeah, that's the right word. So that's where I decided to just tell a classic, very classic, very not cliche, but just a really cool classic origin story of a superhero, because God knows we don't have that many. So instead of like worrying about, oh well, this it has to be a masterpiece, it's got to be this Alan Moore, Grant Morrison thing, like no, let's just do something, go back to basics. Let's have our own classic superhero with a classic origin story, and go from there. And the
how did you land on picking the Coqui though? Like, how did you? I mean, there's so many other elements, so many other things, like and for instance, there's another comic book out there, La Borinqueña. Shout out to Edgardo, but like it's also a Puerto Rican story. It's also tapping into the Taino heritage and the gods and goddesses and such like that. But it didn't pick up on the Coqui piece. So how did you land on figuring out like you wanted to talk about the Coqui, like tell the story about that?
Right. Well, so I really wanted to focus on something that was very different. I'm not saying that there's probably 100 of Coquis characters running around, but I just okay. So the true behind the scenes story of this, the VH1 behind the scenes kind of thing, is that when we're talking about when we're talking about fandoms, right? One of my biggest fandoms is I'm a big fan of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So since as a kid, that was my jam, right? Ninja Turtles here and there, and always like the people being mutated and having powers and all these things. Obviously, loved Spider-Man, all the comic book stuff, but in terms of creators and characters, I found out that most of the people that I'm really fan of have something in common. So, for example, you have Kevin Eastman, who's he wasn't a Marvel creator or came under the Marvel umbrella or DC. He was just doing his own thing. He created this crazy concept and took off. Great. Same thing with Todd McFarlane with Spawn. I love Todd McFarlane, all the thing he does. There's another guy, his name is Brian Pulido. He created Lady Death. He was also doing his own jam and doing his own thing, and took it off. And there's so many other that I'm probably forgetting.
But as far as the mutations is concerned, like TMNT, I like the fact that they weren't humans being transformed into something else. They
were turtles,
reptiles, right? They were already something else. So and then they transform back into what? Human.
What comes with Coqui is wanted to grab some of those elements and link the Puerto Rican heritage and stories of our Taino people and the island itself into, the Coqui, which is the, local animal from Puerto Rico, and then get those aspects. So for example, Coqui, you can see in the comic cover, he's not fully a frog, but something happened to his hands and his feet. And then all of a sudden he's got these, crazy abilities where he's like, leaping and jumping through the mountains of El Yunque. So I wanted people to like see, okay, there's something else going on here. He's just not a regular dude. Something happened to him. And what ties to the crazy teaser that we showed is how, those, the Coqui frogs are, I don't know, being born, right? And then also multiplying and taking over El Yunque. And all of a sudden there's this, wave of, frogs. What's going on? And that's, we get into that in the comic book itself. But that's,
we don't want to give any more away. We want everybody to go pre-order it. Where is it now? On Amazon?
Right now you can go to the website ChidoComics.com. You can buy it from there. There's autographed copies or variant covers. I'm giving away stickers and all, cool, goodies. But then you can also go to Amazon.com and search for Coqui #1. It'll show up. You can pre-order it there. Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million. So every big major bookstore, you can pre-order it now, and you can also go to your local, independent store, and they can, order it as well and get it for you if you want to support, local bookstores or independent bookstores, I should say. In terms of comic book stores, I'm still sort of like going through the hoops with Diamond. That's always, fun.
Common story.
Right. So hopefully, and I think there's the ability for comic stores to order it, but in the meantime, I have my own retailer, sort of like people can contact me, and I can make them available if that were to be the case.
That's great. No, that's good. I wanted to make sure we plug that in there because like that's the whole, not the whole purpose, but that's going to be the clincher for you, and like taking your storytelling, taking your business to like the next level, and getting the stories out there and supporting Coqui. And there's a lot of love for independence in the world, and not just even people who may not read comic books but want to support an up and coming business, want to support an artist, Hispanic artist, so you never know who you're going to reach,
right. And
with
people
like
will be surprised because when you support your local comic book creator or publisher and that sort of thing, when it comes to books that have to do with Latino characters or Latino storytelling, nowadays that the conversation is so hot in terms of like representation and diversity and media and all that stuff. Now is probably the most important time to people really go out there and support these initiatives, because companies are looking, they're paying attention. They're seeing, IP, as is huge with companies like Disney and Netflix and all these people that are trying to look for original programming, and that's sort of like one of the things that I'm looking to get into, but most importantly is to put the content out there, and the more people that support the book, then the more books we can do, the more stories we can tell, the more characters that can show up, and
job creation, right? Like
right.
people who sit back are just common Joe Schmoes, don't understand fandom, don't understand all this other kind of stuff, but they say, I want to support diverse storytelling, regardless of what it is. I don't know what this is, but if I can buy a comic book, or I can buy, an action figure or something that supports what they would like to, their intent is, then that helps also for like propelling your company forward. You could probably provide more jobs for other people in that, so it promotes more, not only the storytelling and the cultural aspect of it, but it also supports real life financials, right? You pay for your kids' college, you pay for the electric bill, you pay for, like just propelling on, again, job creation. You can actually take someone on for, full time if you've been contracting them, as an example. So,
Right.
I think people don't always understand how they can support or be an ally to folks who are trying to get their stories out, or they want to take a stance in diversity. What does that mean? And if they don't have a big platform themselves, or they don't have a lot of power themselves, you know, I'm talking to you guys who are watching, like you have the ability to support and have a big platform with your dollars, because you vote with your wallet, then that provides other things and opportunities. So
And right
I
now,
wanted to make
that's
sure.
very important because, um, you know, we always like to talk about the buying power that the Latino community has in the United States, right? But if we don't do really anything about it,
Yeah.
then it's just going to stay there. We can talk about it every day, but listen, I bought a ticket when Dora the Explorer the movie came out. All right, I don't like Dora. I mean, I don't know, maybe, but I went to see it. I went to support it. Turns out it was really cool. I have fun. You know,
Yeah.
took my kid. Great. So same thing we got to do with, you know, movies like they're coming out, like In the Heights and like all these other movies that are starting to trickle in. We got to show that we're there to support ourselves, because all the other communities do that for themselves. So we also got to come together and sort of like
Exactly.
you know, back up each other. So
So you got your comic book coming out. You got two comic books coming out, basically. You now have, I think I saw you have a deal in the works for some content creation, or you know, with a production house, or
yeah,
what's on the
yeah.
horizon here?
So, you know, there's been early talks about there's interest for Coqui and quite possibly All Star Champions to become animated series. You know, it's still very early because you know how those things go, but the certainly the interest is there, mostly because of what I'm doing. So most of these, you know, dealing with production companies and studios and that sort of thing, they they can see, because I can give them the documents. They can see the overall, you know, picture, right? Everything that's involved in there. Coqui is just the first character in that world, and that, you know, Chido universe, right? Where I'm tying a bunch of other characters that live in the island that are also representative of each, you know, little town or that kind of story. So everything is there. So they're looking at that, but you know, as every responsible corporation, they want to see, you know, what happens. They want to see, you know, how it, you know,
Before they
interacts with
invest their
people.
money, they want to
Right.
see how it works.
So, and that goes back to, you know, how the book, you know, goes and how well it's accepted. And so far, the people that I've sent, you know, review copies, reviews are coming back. They all love it. So hopefully, you know, we can go from there and continue making stories.
Well, I hope so too. Um, we're already starting to get close to the end, if you can believe it. Like it always goes so fast. So before we wrap it up, I also want to make sure that we find out where to find you. Where are your social media, you know, locations, or you personally, or anything else you want to share?
Sure. So it's very easy. I think in all social media platforms, at least, you know, the most common ones, right? Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is at Chido Comics. So you can find us there. Then there's also our website where we put all sorts of information in there, and you can find the links to the pre-order for the Coqui book right now. Later on, the All Star Champions will be there. So it's very, you know, ChidoComics.com. You'll find it right there. And then I think for me, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and it's Ivan DD6. Two D's as in David, and then number 6, because I'm a huge Daredevil nerd. So there you go.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Yeah, everybody can keep up with all the updates and cool things that we're doing and
That's
support
awesome.
us, obviously.
Of course, and support, you know, the independents, independent comic book creators, you know, the shops, all of that. I mean, it all goes hand in hand. So, you know, again, thank you, Ivan, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. You know, again, happy Fangirl Friday. It's every Friday is Fangirl Friday Live, and we're unpacking the business behind fandom, you know, talking to our friends, family, colleagues, you know, such as Yvonne and other folks. I mean, next week we'll talk to somebody else, of course, within fandom. So be sure to tune in. If you haven't been following along on YouTube, be sure to go to our channel, Fangirl Friday Live, and like and subscribe. I felt like one of those other creators, right? Like ring the little bell, and then make sure Yeah, that you're liking, subscribing, and writing all of your comments. So, DM us as well. Like, let us know what else you want to see or who else you might want to see. What other companies you might want to have us feature, because we're content creators and sometimes we get a little dry on what we're creating. So, always happy to take suggestions. And again, thanks again, Yvonne. Thank you all for spending your time with us every week. And we will see you again next week at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fangirl Friday Live. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Yeah.